The coronavirus variant called Delta, which was first identified in India, is becoming an increasing concern for governments. Along with other variants, it's being blamed for infections in Moscow, tripling in just 2 weeks. More than 9,000 were recorded in the last 24 hours, the highest daily tally since the pandemic began. The head of Germany's disease control agency expects Delta to be his country's dominant strain within months because it's so much more infectious. And Britain estimates that Delta is behind 90% of its rising infections that are mostly among young and unvaccinated people. It's now offering the jab to everyone in England aged 18 and over. Live to Jonah Hull in London for us. So, Jonah, this variant is not just a concern for the UK, but for a number of countries.
Oh, sure. I mean, the Delta variant, I believe, is now present in something like 80 countries around the world. I mean, this is, we know, a much more transmissible strain of the virus, between 40 and 80% more infectious. And, you know, as long as people travel, as long as planes fly, limits and restrictions notwithstanding, the virus will travel with them. And that is why we've got a particular problem here in the UK. The government has faced very serious criticism for not shutting the borders quickly enough to travellers from India when this variant, originally known as the Indian variant, of course, was first discovered a few months ago. It's now responsible for a third wave of infections, doubling every 11 days, so increasing exponentially here in the UK, and targeting younger people rather than older people, and that's because of the success of the vaccine rollout here. 10 million young adults have yet to receive the vaccine. They're the ones who are mostly getting infected, and they're also the ones who tend not to get very serious instances of the disease and to die from it, and so hospitalizations and deaths are not rising anything like as quickly as infection numbers here. Of course, that could change. But the vaccine rollout and the success of the vaccine rollout is likely to be the factor that will determine the extent to which the Delta virus gets into and stays in and prolongs the pandemic in other countries. Take Russia, for instance. You mentioned it there. Only an eighth of the population have been vaccinated with Russia's own Sputnik vaccine, 18 million people. Moscow being described by the mayor as deteriorating fast, 30% increase in infections day on day in Moscow. They're now mandating people to get the vaccine, forcing them to in public-facing jobs to try and protect the population there. And indeed, in Germany, that you mentioned there as well, many European EU countries are now doing very well with their vaccine programs. But again, younger populations will tend to still be unvaccinated. And the German authorities warning people not to let their guard down, suggesting that the Delta variant could become dominant in Germany and across the EU by the autumn.
Jonah, thank you for that. Jonah Hull live there in London. Well, for more on this Delta variant of the coronavirus, let's speak to Dr. Bharat Pankhania, who's joining us from Bath in the UK. He's an infectious disease control and a senior lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School. Thank you very much for being with us, a specialist in infectious disease control, I should say. Now, the so-called Delta variant, Doctor, is now the dominant strain, as we heard, in the UK. There's been an increase in cases in Germany as well. Why is this variant far more transmissible than the others? What are its characteristics?
So its characteristics are it is a better match for the ACE2 receptor on the human cells. So if this is the receptor, this is the virus, it forms a better fix, a better attachment. And because it is able to better attach to human cells, you need fewer number of virus particles to set up an infection. So it's number one, a better attacher, and therefore you need fewer numbers to set up that infection. And as your report clearly indicated, it will become the dominant strain because it has an advantage in being able to infect humans.
Right. How high is the case fatality rate with this particular variant compared to the Alpha variant, for example?
Yes, so the case fatality rate, which is a really important item to also look at, is no different from the Alpha variant. So that's the good news. The other piece of also positive news is that the vaccines protect against Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and the Delta variants. So that's very, very important to also know that the vaccines, irrespective of the variant, are effective in preventing serious illness and death.
You mentioned the vaccines there. It would seem that it's mostly younger, unvaccinated people who are being affected by this Delta variant. So what work is going into booster vaccines and as we face variants in the future?
So with respect to booster vaccines, this is something that we will have to consider later on in the year. The bigger emergency right now is to immunize as many people as possible, as fast as possible. And in the UK, we are immunizing people 18 and above. We should really be immunizing 12 and above, and as soon as vaccine supplies become available, we will do so. With respect to giving boosters, it is something we will consider and do late in the autumn this year to provide cover against any other dominant variants that may be there in circulation and may be bypassing the vaccines.
Thank you very much for talking to us about this. Thank you for your insight. Dr. Bharat Pankhania, specialist in infectious disease control and a senior lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School, joining us there from Bath. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.